With Season 3 of the Bulls franchise in the books, it's time for another off-season video. But before we get there, we have one more college update for you, and it's the biggest one of the year. March Madness is upon us. Here is everything that happened in a crazy tournament filled with draft prospects. Dust off your silver slippers, Cinderella has arrived. In one of the most raucous first two rounds of recent memory, 4 teams ranked 8th or lower pulled opening weekend upsets. Creighton, riding their star Reese Freeman, upset number 1 seed Missouri and Jermaine Rhodes 79-73. Freeman scored 31 points, tacking yet another eruptive performance onto his resume. While Creighton's win over Missouri would be shocking, it wouldn't steal the show. UC San Diego, fresh off their disappointing upset at the hands of Colorado State, re-established why they were once a Cinderella favorite, as Terrion Deadman led the way with 21 points in a 67-61 upset of number 4 UConn and Antoine Okoro, followed by a 23-point showing in a Mountain West showdown against Nevada and Damari Hagan, in which the Tritons won 64-63. Joining UC San Diego is number 11 Tulsa, led by Alan Kinsey, as the Golden Hurricanes upset number 6 Maryland in the first round, followed by a win over number 3 Utah. It caps what had been a disappointing season for Jawan Zusman, who entered his freshman year with the Terps as a potential lottery pick, but struggled throughout the year. It's also an unceremonious exit for big man Trey Orton and the Utes, as Orton scored just 9 points in the loss. Returning to their role as Cinderella is Florida Gulf Coast. The Eagles stunned number 3 seed Ohio State, who falls in the opening round for a second straight season, followed by a stirring upset 81-80 in double overtime over Texas A&M. Keenan Vonleh stirred the Eagles to yet another shocking run, as the sophomore guard scored a combined 52 points in the opening rounds. And then there was Kentucky, who defeated number 2 Iowa and senior guard Ira Mack in the second round. Their freshman duo that once looked lost seems to have settled, as Derek Hardaway and Dorian Knight averaged 17.5 points each in the first 2 rounds. Kicking off the Sweet 16, it was UC San Diego, beating Creighton 84-76. Terrion Deadman outshined Reese Freeman, scoring 29 to Freeman's 21 as the Tritons' run moves on. The Kentucky Wildcats appear to be catching lightning in a bottle, as Derek Hardaway leads Kentucky with 23 points in a 74-68 win over North Carolina. The dominance of Illinois' D.D. McDyess was apparent yet again, as the presumed top pick in the upcoming draft scored 32 points in an 85-69 win over Florida. Logan Warwick scored 18. The Golden Hurricane kept it close with Kansas, but Jaden Bibbs proved to be too talented, scoring 11 of his 18 points in the final 3 minutes of the Jayhawks' win over Tulsa 73-65. A three-pointer by Zellian Page with 11 seconds left was enough to lift the Florida State Seminoles over the Wisconsin Badgers, avenging Florida State's loss to Miami a year ago in the Sweet 16. Page ended with 17 points. Simon Beneman had 20 points and 13 rebounds for Wisconsin. Fort Myers is rocking again. FGCU pulls off yet another stunner, this in the blowout variety, as they thrash the Duke Blue Devils 79-54, led by 21 points from Keenan Vonleh. Stephon Franklin struggled to just 7 points for Duke. The depth of the USC Trojans was simply too much to match for Memphis, as Marquise Hightower scored a game-high 21 in the 72-52 win. The Battle of LA will live on, as UCLA outlasts Gonzaga in a 65-63 slugfest. Luis Kuzma scored 14 points in the defensive battle, while Dele Bagley had 12. This sets up a USC-UCLA Elite 8 matchup. Time now for the Elite 8, as the UCSD Tritons continue to soar, and there will be no surprise run to the title game for this version of the disappointing Kentucky Wildcats, as the Tritons defeat them 73-65. Terrion Deadman scored 18 points while holding Derek Hardaway to just 8. D.D. McDyess leads yet another blowout win, scoring 29 points to lead Illinois to the Final Four with an 83-69 win over Kansas. Jaden Bibbs had just 11 points in the loss. That leaves 2 interstate showdowns to close out the Elite 8, the first of which was won by Florida Gulf Coast. They claimed the battle for Florida in a shocker, upsetting Florida State 57-56 thanks to a pair of free throws with 3.4 seconds left to book their ticket to the Final Four. Keenan Vonleh had 13 points to lead the Eagles. The LA Crosstown Showdown didn't have the type of fireworks many expected, but the Trojans prevailed over inner-city rival UCLA 62-51, staking their claim of ownership of Los Angeles. George Hoffman scored a game-high 17 points, while Luis Kuzma struggled for a second straight game, finishing with 13. Finally, the Final Four is here. 4 teams remain, 2 of which a lot of people expected, and 2 of which are complete surprises. It's Illinois taking on UC San Diego, and USC taking on Florida Gulf Coast. By the skin of their teeth, the Fighting Illini are off to the title game. D.D. McDyess continued his hot streak, scoring 34 points in the win, while a last-second three-pointer by Terrion Dedmon clanged out. Dedmon did finish with 23, but the Tritons fall 82-80. Much like Illinois, it wouldn't be pretty for the Trojans, but they survive yet another defensive showdown to advance to the title game. Dion Ivey scored a game-high 17, and Keenan Vonleh was held to just 8 in the 61-55 USC win. This tournament was full of Cinderella stories, but at the end, it's just 2 1 seeds duking it out for all the marbles. As the saying goes, the 4th time is the charm. After 3 heartbreaking losses during the regular season and the conference championship, the USC Trojans exact revenge on Illinois when it matters most, with an 80-79 win over their new Big Ten rival in the national title game. Marquise Hightower will be a folk hero in Los Angeles if such a thing is even possible, as his leaping, winding layup with 6.9 seconds remaining pushed the Trojans to the win. D.D. McDyess's last-second shot circled the entire rim before falling out. Illinois led throughout the game, building a 21-9 lead early in the first half before owning a 41-32 halftime lead. The Trojans raced back, cutting the lead to 64-61 with 12 minutes left, but the lead hovered between 3 and 8 points until a 6-0 run powered by a pair of triples from George Hoffman, a 45% shooter from deep, cut the game to 79-78, Illinois leading with 32 seconds left. On the ensuing possession, Dion Ivey, one of the best defenders in the country, plucked away his 4th steal of the game, and that would set up Hightower's heroics. Hightower would take home March Madness MVP honors after finishing with 21 points in this championship game. D.D. McDyess did not disappoint on the biggest stage though, scoring 30 points, believe it or not, his lowest output of the NCAA tournament. And the loss is not going to hurt his stock as the consensus #1 pick and a generational prospect. McDyess is a Chicago-raised point guard in the mold of Derrick Rose, but the difference is apparently McDyess not only has Rose's athleticism, but Chris Paul's IQ, Kyrie Irving's ball handling, and Steph Curry's shooting. He is being touted as the perfect point guard. That's some high expectations to live up to though, and sure enough, DD's not a huge fan of being called that. He says he still has a lot of work to do and a lot to prove before he can be mentioned in the same tier as those players. But anyone who's coached McDyess, played with him, or been around him has nothing but good things to say, and they believe he absolutely has what it takes to reach that status. Expectations were high when he joined his hometown Fighting Illini, but no one expected him to average nearly 25 a game and over 6 assists on nearly 39% three-point shooting. But that's exactly what he did, and he nearly carried his team to a national championship as well, but no shame in falling to a uber-talented USC team, especially when he scored the most points ever in an NCAA tournament. He declared for the draft immediately after the season ended, and instantly found himself as the target of a bidding war between Nike and Adidas, receiving contract offers that even most NBA All-Stars couldn't even dream of. So is it too early to call McDyess the savior of the NBA? Maybe, but it's basically guaranteed at this point that whoever gets the #1 pick is gonna get a hell of a player. I don't know how we're gonna get him, but how cool would it be to have DD follow in the footsteps of D Rose and stay in Chicago and play for the Bulls. But outside of McDyess, this is still a really exciting draft class. And how interesting is it to see the top prospects not come from traditional blue bloods like Kentucky or Duke, but rather from USC, the reigning national champions. Their recent recruiting success has culminated in winning the big one, and that's only going to help their chances of sustaining that success. Last college season, they had the #1 recruit Javon Boston, who ended up going #1 in the draft as well. Boston was not able to win a championship himself, but he gave way to Marquise Hightower, George Hoffman, Dion Ivey, and they were absolutely unstoppable together, and all three players have played themselves into first-round projections. It looks like USC is going to be at the top of the college basketball landscape for years to come, as now the recruits just keep coming in. Tu Vargas, Steven Ingram, and Trevon Redding look to be the next freshman big three suiting up for the Trojans next season, as all three top 10 recruits have verbally committed to USC. And much like the established blue bloods like Duke, the USC bond has already drawn a close relationship with all these prospects. Marquise Hightower has already expressed interest in sticking together with his fellow Trojans in the NBA. Could we eventually see a repeat of what we saw with the Villanova boys and the New York Knicks? It would certainly be an interesting storyline. McDyess and the USC Big Three are the undisputed good guys of the NBA draft picture. But one player has taken an opposite approach and embraced his role as the villain, and that is Dorian Knight of Kentucky. The world was introduced to his brashness on National Signing Day when he pulled a ridiculous stunt, throwing away a South Carolina hat, saying, "Who really thought I'd go to that trash-ass school," before putting on a Kentucky hat. Obviously that didn't go over so well with South Carolina fans, who really let him hear it when he came to visit. South Carolina point guard Nathan Sheely took it personally and was caught mouthing, "Who really thought we wanted your trash ass on our team," before the contest started. But even with the amount of trash that Knight talks, he can always back it up, and he certainly did on that night when he dropped 22 and shot perfect from 3. It appears he's just a really competitive player who will do whatever it takes to win, which is perfectly illustrated by the incident where he slapped a player in practice for missing a defensive assignment. His teammate Derek Hardaway, who knows him better than anyone, commented on the antics by saying, "He might be an asshole, plain and simple, but the dude just wants to win. His mouth writes big checks, but his ass always cashes them." One franchise will look to select Dorian Knight despite his trash talking in order to unlock his behind-the-arc flamethrower potential. We focus most of our attention on college basketball here, but there's always some interesting prospects coming from overseas. The Bulls are well aware of that as they drafted 4 international players in last year's draft. This time around, the highest ranked foreign prospect is also one of the only prospects to ever come out of the country of India. Dash Bhullar has a game similar to Trae Young, a small guard who can pull it from deep, struggles with efficiency though, and plays with reckless abandon. But at the end of the day, shooting and shot creation are very important skills, and Bhullar certainly has them. Matyas Gorbenko is a very different player from Bhullar, a 6'9" forward with an elite interior game. A small forward, power forward hybrid who projects to be a 4 at the NBA level thanks to his post-scoring prowess. Ezi Musli out of Turkey looks to be a very similar player to Mace Gadzuric, a center that we drafted last year. He can score at all 3 levels, he can distribute, but has some issues in the athleticism and defense departments. Joko Soluade is a gifted athlete from Nigeria, plays with great hustle and grit, but his outside shot right now is non-existent. Ivan Shved out of Ukraine is another 3-point shooting big man. Not as much of a playmaker, but has a big frame that allows him to score inside. Lovro Tavkar out of Slovenia is a defensive-minded big man who really has a limited offensive game. And Don Van Leer is a fringe first-round prospect from the Netherlands. A 6'7" point guard who has a lot of similarities to Andre Lorbeck, but struggles even more with his jump shot, and is much less athletic. Alright, that's all the storylines we have going into the draft. Check out that awesome slam cover for DD McDyess though. Once again, shout out Jeff Rule for all the amazing content. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the offseason, let's zoom through these NBA playoffs in 2026. We're going to start with the East play-in, and it's the 9-10 battle here between two disappointing teams, the Celtics and Knicks. 42 seconds in regulation, Porzingis ties it with a layup and it goes to overtime. 5 minutes later, Christian Wood with the slam to tie it at 139, and we're in another extra period. Here's Josh Hart climbing the ladder on the unicorn, giving the Knicks a 3-point lead. And now Jordan Poole running the pick and roll with Wood, and that ends up being the dagger that the Celtics can't come back from. In what might be the best play-in game of all time, the Knicks win in double overtime 160-153. Jalen Brunson was fouled out during that whole overtime sequence, but Jordan Poole put the team on his back to outlast a valiant 53-point performance from Jason Tatum. Somehow that wasn't enough. In the other East play-in game, the Cavs clinched the 7th seed with a win over the Magic, setting up a Knicks-Magic game for the 8th seed, and the Knicks end up coming out on top. And that's actually huge for us because our Bulls own the Magic's pick as a result of the Drew Holiday trade, and that pick is going to end up sliding right into the back of the lottery. Over in the West, it's the young Utah Jazz taking down Zion's Pelicans. They clinched the 7th seed with this win. And in the 9-10 matchup, it's the Phoenix Suns beating Sacramento. This team was without Devin Booker, who's out for the season, and without Fred VanVleet. But KD, Bradley Beal, and Matas Buzelis all stepped up big time. And the Kings' defense continues to be a total disaster, even with OG Anunoby on the roster. And in the battle for the 8th seed, it's the Suns with another huge win, as they're now going to limp into a 1-8 matchup with the San Antonio Spurs. So all 8 first-round matchups are decided. Milwaukee will face New York, Atlanta will face Cleveland, Portland will face Utah. Let me know who you think is going to win it all in the comments. Starting with the Knicks-Bucks series, the Bucks win Game 1 in a nail-biter, but the Knicks pull it out in a defensive Game 2. But that was when Giannis took over, scoring 51 in a Game 3 victory, and the Bucks go on to win the next 2 games, ending the Knicks season. They will face the winner of the Philly-Charlotte series, and this was a crazy one. The Sixers won the first 3 games pretty handily, thanks to some amazing performances from Tyrese Maxey. But the Hornets refused to lay down and accept a sweep, winning the next 2 games, setting up a Game 6 with an opportunity to force a Game 7, up by 1 with under 30 seconds left. Brandon Miller with the poster on Kyle Anderson, and just like that, this series is tied. We saw New York make a 3-0 comeback against Atlanta last year. Could we see it again? Game 7 comes down to the wire. Hornets need to score, and they do. LaMelo Ball with the 3-pointer. Down by 2 now, time winding down. DJ Wagner pump fakes, drives, misses the layup. Just brutal. They were that close to sending Game 7 to overtime and potentially making a 3-0 comeback, but it falls just short. Tyrese Maxey with another great performance to help his team avoid embarrassment. But I get the sense this is not the last you're going to see of the Hornets in the playoffs. Their rebuild has gone really well. LaMelo Ball's looking like a superstar now. It was the Heat taking on the Pistons in the 3-6 series, with the Pistons having home court advantage. But it doesn't matter, as the Heat are just a different breed in the playoffs, and they pull off a clean sweep of the Pistons. Even after all the trades they made in the regular season, Detroit is not even able to win a single playoff game. The final Eastern series was Atlanta versus Cleveland. Cavs come off a trip to a conference finals last year. The Hawks come off of that 3-0 choke job. And sure enough, the 2-seeded Hawks postseason run did not get off to a good start, dropping Game 1 to the Cavs and unable to stop Donovan Mitchell or Evan Mobley. Shout out Cole Anthony though, he had a triple-double. The Hawks clean it up in Game 2 though and get the big victory. What a game from Trae Young. And the Cavs are still without Darius Garland to begin the postseason. And despite a monster game from Mobley, Mitchell was a no-show and the Cavs couldn't get it done. And then the Hawks started to settle into a groove, a big win in Game 3, a close win in Game 4, and in Game 5, Atlanta delivers the knockout blow with a 29-point victory. Darius Garland was able to return for that final elimination game, but it was too little too late. The Western Conference first round is going to kick off with Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs, the finals runner-ups from last year. They get off to a good start here, getting 3 big wins over the Suns. Phoenix avoids the sweep, but the Spurs complete the gentleman's sweep in Game 5. And San Antonio looks hungry to finish what they started last season. Now it's Houston facing off against the dilapidated Warriors, who are without Steph Curry for the rest of the season. This series was a total snooze fest. Rockets get it done easily, and they move on to face San Antonio in the second round. 2 more Southwestern teams face off here in the 3-6 matchup. It's the Grizzlies and the Mavs. Dallas has not had much postseason success in this series, and that continues here as they drop the first 2 games. Luka gets one back here in Game 3, but Desmond Bane and Ja Morant have a great Game 4 to go up 3-1. Mavs on the ropes. They're up by 1 here in Game 5. Ja Morant gives Memphis the lead. Tie game now. Mavs have the last shot. DeLon Wright is the one who takes it, and it's off. And we head to overtime. Mavs fighting till the final buzzer, but Ja Morant probing inside, and he will not be denied. The floater is good. Luka now has one more final chance, pulls up for 3, it's off. Marcus Smart rebounds, and the series is over. Dallas drops yet another first-round series, and the Grizzlies move on. Luka played his heart out, got a triple-double, but whatever the Mavs are doing, it's not working, even with Luka playing at his best. They're going to need some changes in the offseason. And closing out the first round, it was the Jazz taking on a stacked Blazers team, and they were no match for Kawhi Leonard, Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe. Portland sweeps and moves on to face the Grizzlies. 8 teams remain now. It's the Blazers Grizzlies series, Spurs Rockets, Bucks Sixers, and Heat Hawks. And it's Milwaukee getting a win here in Game 1 versus Philly. Great game from Buddy Hield. Game 2, though, much closer, tied at 106. Tyrese Maxey buries it for a 3-point-Sixer lead. Time running down. Dame time is now. And it's going to be another overtime game in this playoffs. Going down to the wire here, tied with 10 seconds left. Giannis on the roll, slamming it home. That leaves time, though, for one last shot for Joel Embiid. Good defense by Steven Adams, forcing him to fall away from the basket and miss the shot. Milwaukee takes the first 2 games of the series. Maxey continues to put together an awesome postseason, but his teammates, aka Joel Embiid, are not showing up. It's the same story in Game 3 as Dame drops 42, and the reigning champs are up 3-zip. But Philly lives to fight another day. Another fantastic game from Maxey. Barely gives the Sixers the edge. And Philly wins again in Game 5, this time by a wide margin. And there's a good game from Joel Embiid. But now we move to Game 6, and could we be seeing another 3-0 comeback? Sixers were almost on the losing end of one, a round to go, and now they try to force 7. But in Game 6, Milwaukee and Giannis handle business, and they get the big win. Giannis with a triple-double. And the Bucks are back in the ECF. The Miami Heat swept the Pistons in the first round, but now it's their turn to get swept at the hands of Trae Young and the Hawks. Young put up ridiculous numbers in this series, capping it off with a near triple-double with 42 points, and now they will face the Bucks for a finals berth. But in the West, it's the star-studded super team Rockets facing a team of young phenoms in the Spurs, and Wemby gets the better of Anthony Davis in the first 2 games. In Game 3, Jalen Green, though, has a big day, and it looks like the Rockets might make this interesting, but the Spurs are just too good, too balanced, and they finish off Houston in the next 2 games to move on to the Western Conference Final. What a series for Chris Middleton. Facing them will be the winner of Memphis versus Portland. Memphis made it to the conference finals last year, and they won another crack at San Antonio. 2 great performances from Memphis to go up 2-0, and I did not expect the Blazers to go out this way, but they end up getting swept. So both of the finals teams from last year are still alive, The Spurs get a rematch with Memphis from last year, and Milwaukee will face Atlanta as we get closer to crowning another champion. We'll go to the East first as Milwaukee loses Game 1 at home to Atlanta thanks to another monster game from Trae Young. But the stars shine for Milwaukee in Game 2, Dame and Giannis combining for 70 points as they tie up the series. But as the series shifts to the Hawks' home court, Atlanta retakes the series lead, and they go up 3-1 on the defending champs. In a crucial Game 5 though, facing elimination, Milwaukee barely squeaks out this win. But in Game 6, the Hawks finish them off. There will be new blood in the NBA Finals. Trae Young continues his postseason rampage and he takes home Eastern Conference Finals MVP. But who will he face in the championship series? Two defensive teams clashing for the second time in 2 years. These teams have got to hate each other by this point. Wemby's Spurs get the win in Game 1. And in an overtime thriller, the Spurs protect home court. Middleton and Wembanyama continuing a great postseason. In Game 3, the Spurs win another tight one. Wemby with 41, and his team is in prime position to make the finals yet again. This series is just a few plays away from being a close one though. Unfortunate for the Grizzlies, but they do stave off the sweep in Game 4, winning by 8, but this proved to be a catastrophic game for both teams. Wemby goes down with an injury at the worst possible time, fracturing his hand, will not be able to play for the rest of the season. And you would think at least this may open the door for the Grizzlies to come back. Unfortunately, the Grizzlies get some bad news too. Jaren Jackson will also have to miss the rest of this series as he sprained his knee. Sucks to see the playoffs be determined by injuries, but that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. And sure enough, the Spurs get an ugly victory in Game 5, only scoring 6 in the fourth quarter, but still holding on. They will hobble into a finals series against the Hawks, where they don't project to have much of a chance. Despite missing the final game, Victor Wembanyama wins Western Conference Finals MVP for a fantastic series. And the finals matchup is set. A Wemby-less Spurs versus a full-strength Hawks team. And San Antonio puts up a fight in Game 1, but they fall short. In Game 2, they're not able to stay quite as close, losing by 27. This series appears to be likely heading towards a sweep, but somehow the Spurs rally behind their home fans in Game 3 and put up 125 points to win. Keldon Johnson does a really good job taking over the offense. Even Jeremy Sohan had 18. An unexpected victory leaves some hope for this series being somewhat interesting. Let's see if they can do it again. And in Game 4, the Hawks go up 3-1. Atlanta with a very balanced offensive and defensive team effort. This team looks poised to win it all. Game 5 is a blowout win at State Farm Arena, and for the first time since 1958, the Hawks are champions. You could say they didn't win fair and square. Who knows how this series would have went if Wemby was healthy, but Doc Rivers finally gets another ring, coaching the team he once played for, and you gotta give it to the Hawks front office for surrounding Trae Young with the perfect pieces. They go out and get a defensive-minded guard in DeJounte Murray from San Antonio. They took a while to gel together, but they finally did this year. But in Season 2 of this franchise, they also made a big move to acquire Bam Adebayo. As the Heat were looking to rebuild, Bam ended up being a game changer for this defense. And even with that trade, they were able to keep young center Onyeka Okongwu, who also played a big role. There were a lot of good role players on this team. They got a prolific bench scorer in Terry Rozier. AJ Griffin developed into a really good 3-and-D wing. Same with Sadiq Bey. And the draft pick they made in the first offseason of this series, Kwame Evans Jr., ended up being a major glue guy for them. But hats off to the San Antonio Spurs. After making a Cinderella run last year as the 8th seed, it's now 2 finals trips in 2 years. It's clear that Wembanyama is going to keep this team in contention for years to come. Sadly, he couldn't play in this one, but even post Greg Popovich, the Spurs are putting together something special. And one of these years, it's bound to pay off. But this year is the year of Trae Young, who silenced the doubters that called him an empty stats, losing ball hog point guard. It was clear after this season that he is one of the best players in this league, and it's only right that he takes home Finals MVP. But the honorable mention on the losing team definitely goes to Keldon Johnson, who had a marvelous series, basically putting the team on his back without Wemby. But that's how the story goes in Season 3 of the franchise. Hawks win, and the Chicago Bulls are still without a playoff berth outside of Season 1. Not a whole lot of notable retirements this offseason after LeBron retired last year. Al Horford is the main one, and Rick Carlisle retires as the coach of the Pacers. And now we're in the thick of the offseason. It's time to change some rules, and the Board of Governors votes to increase the salary cap by $10 million. That's the only change happening this year. I'm probably going to be using this change quite a bit in the future of this series, because without doing that, the salary cap doesn't increase like it should in 2K23. And the only way to do it is by doing those rule changes. Okay, so we didn't have a huge stake in this lottery, as we only had the 15th best odds, and we end up getting the 15th pick. If the Magic had made the playoffs, that pick would be even worse, but thankfully, they missed it. But there weren't a whole lot of surprises in this lottery. The big one, though, is Vancouver jumps ahead of San Antonio for that #1 pick. The newly expanded Woodsmen are now first in line to select D.D. McDice, and the Spurs, who own the rights to our draft pick, will draft second. They're followed by Washington and Oklahoma City and Houston, who is still getting picks from Brooklyn as a result of that Harden trade. That rounds out the top 5 as we move closer to draft day. First, we have some staff moves to make. We hired a new guard guru coach in Fab Flournoy and a new CFO in Irvin Childress. And despite having the worst record in the league, Billy Donovan's job is safe in my book. I like the playbook he offers, and ultimately he just wasn't given much to work with this season. We're going to do our best to change that in this offseason. But as usual, there were a few head coaching changes around the league, the first of which comes in Dallas. Jason Kidd is not going to be extended after his team lost in the first round yet again, and he is going to be replaced by Adrian Griffin. But Kidd still has some value around the league, and the Pistons are going to scoop him up, as after a disappointing showing in the playoffs, they also let go of their head coach, Monty Williams. We'll see if Kidd is more able to capitalize on this talented roster. Mike Brown is also out as Kings head coach after another disappointing play-in loss, and he will be replaced by San Antonio Spurs assistant Jacob Underwood. We've seen a lot of teams make hires from the Spurs coaching tree. The Spurs obviously one of the best defenses in the league, which is an area that the Kings need help with. The Orlando Magic are going to hire a new face in Phil Pressey to lead their team after they let go of Jamal Mosley. And the Pacers are going to replace the retired Rick Carlisle with Perry Nixon. Okay, we've made it to the draft. Always one of the most exciting parts of franchise modes. But before we get right into it, let's talk strategy. So we have the 15th pick from Orlando. The Spurs have our pick, and that ends up being number 2 overall. As I've gone over at length throughout last season, that actually shouldn't be the case. 2K's draft pick protection rules are very rudimentary compared to real life. In reality, the Bulls actually do have a conditional first-round pick owed to San Antonio as a result of the DeMar DeRozan trade. I think it was top 10 protected, at least that's how it was in this game. And in last year's draft, that pick fell inside the top 10, and we ended up keeping the pick. But the difference between 2K and real life is in 2K, protections never last for more than 1 year. In real life, the Bulls should continue to get that pick back if they keep finishing inside the top 10. They should be able to get it back again and again until a certain deadline year, which is many years in the future. But in our franchise, because we retained that pick for 1 season, that means in the next draft, our pick goes to San Antonio unconditionally. And that's exactly what happened here. We were the worst team in basketball, and we don't even have our own draft pick. Instead, it goes to a team that made the finals. So that seems a little unfair, right? Well, yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm going to play by the rules of the game, the same rules that all the other teams play by. So I'm not just going to gift myself that number 2 pick just because I feel like I deserve it. But that doesn't necessarily stop me from trading up in the draft. No one ever said that's against the rules. I was looking for potential trade-up partners, trying to keep it realistic as the number 15 pick isn't exactly that valuable. So I was trying to just move up a few picks, but I didn't find anything that I really fell in love with. But then I realized something. The Spurs are in contending mode, which means they don't really value draft picks. They want talent that's going to help them out right now. And here they are with this number 2 pick, which they see as a total gold mine in the trade market. I was shocked at how little they were asking in return for this pick. You're not going to believe what I pulled off with this trade. If 2K is going to take away my draft pick, I think I can give myself the liberty to legally abuse the trade logic. In a blockbuster move, the Bulls are going to be trading back for their number 2 overall pick. And all it took was the number 15 pick, Jaden McDaniels, Killian Hayes, and a lottery-protected first-rounder a couple years into the future. If I'm being completely honest, I didn't even need to add that last pick in 2028. It would have accepted it without that. I just wanted to make it somewhat fair and realistic so that I would still owe them a pick as the Bulls do in real life. But this is going to change our entire draft strategy. We're back to having a top pick, and we didn't give up any of our core pieces in the process. Obviously, Jaden McDaniels is a guy that I liked a lot. When I gave away Patrick Williams, I did see myself investing in J-Mac long term, but when I saw this opportunity, I had to take it. Killian Hayes has a pretty high rating in this franchise. I acquired him at the trade deadline last season, even though he was not the main piece of the trade, but for obvious reasons, including having a complete inability to shoot the basketball, I don't really bat an eye at giving Killian Hayes away. So there it is, we have our pick back. Unfortunately, it's not number 1, but in what looks to be a really talented draft class, we're going to still have a lot of potentially franchise-changing options. There were a few other big trades that happened before the draft. The first one between the Thunder and the Kings. Sacramento makes a move towards a rebuild, sending away Lauri Markkanen. Obviously, the Thunder have a wealth of young talent and draft capital that they can use to get a star, and they do exactly that, sending Brian Vaughn and 2 first-round picks, specifically an early first-rounder and a late first-rounder in this year's draft, for Lauri. The Thunder are a talented team, but their offense was abysmal last year, and that held them back. Lauri should help that in a big way. The Raptors are also going to send DeMar DeRozan away to Indiana. The second DeRozan in Toronto stint didn't work out as expected, but he still has some obvious scoring talent. The Pacers are a team that's trying to make a leap next year, so they're going to send their first-round pick plus Devin Vassell to bring in the veteran scoring forward. The Pacers also brought in Alperen Şengün in last year's free agency, which made Miles Turner an expendable asset. And after taking on the salary of DeRozan, they decided to give away Turner to the Miami Heat for Isaiah Joe and a future first-rounder. One more thing before the draft, here is my personal board. There's no more mystery about where we're going to pick and whether we're going to be able to get a game-changing player. That's basically guaranteed now. But what's not guaranteed is that we'll get DD McDyess. It would certainly be a perfect storyline to see DD get drafted by Chicago, stay at home, but unfortunately Vancouver beat us out in the lottery, and I think they would be pretty dumb to miss out on him. I don't anticipate being able to select DD, but if he somehow falls into our lap, you best believe I'm taking him. But the consensus number 2 player in the draft looks like much more than a consolation prize. One draft insider says that even though all the attention's been on DD, he expects Luis Kuzma to make at least 5 All-Star games in his career. Kuzma is a ball-dominant 6'9" interior scorer who has a variety of moves down low and has some pretty decent defensive potential. He does struggle with his jump shot, but that's the case with a lot of prospects. He showed that he's a winner by leading his team to the Elite Eight, only losing to the eventual champion USC. Logic tells me he is the pick at number 2. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have any competition whatsoever. I have Simon Benjamin behind him at number 3, and if I really want to take a point guard, even after D.D. McDyess is off the board, Ira Mack and Jaden Bibbs seem like pretty solid options. We'll start with Benjamin, who's probably best as a center, but has potential to play the 4 as well. Elite offensive game, has the strength to finish in the interior, and the touch to play on the perimeter. Now the thing is, our center rotation is getting pretty clogged, especially if we bring in another one, so I don't know if the pick makes that much sense for us, but the talent is undeniable. And the fact of the matter is, we need shooting right now. Benjamin gives us that, Kuzma does not. Another player who gives us needed shooting ability is Ira Mack, the point guard out of Iowa. He's experienced incredible growth throughout his 4 years in college. Seems like an incredibly hard worker and a great teammate. And his game is very, very polished. He might not be the flashiest pick, but at the same time, he might be exactly what we need. Jaden Bibbs, though, seems like a lower floor, higher ceiling option at point guard. Very exciting to watch through 2 years at Kansas. He's got excellent handles, an excellent first step, and explosion to the rim. The thing is, though, he's just 6'1", and he kind of plays like a shooting guard in a point guard's body. Not the best passer. Of course, we have a good amount of passing talent on the roster already, so there's a chance Bibbs fits right in. His three-point shot isn't the greatest, but it's not the worst either. So those 4 guys, on top of obviously McDyess, are my main candidates for pick number 2. Obviously, we do not have a mid-first round pick anymore, and we're going to have to wait until the second round to pick again unless we trade back in. As a result, the rest of my board is not super relevant, but if you're curious, you can take a look. And finally, welcome to the 2026 NBA Draft. It's finally time to get this show on the road. The Vancouver Woodsmen are on the clock with pick number 1. Who's it going to be? Will it be McDyess? Will it be Kuzma? Will it be someone else? It is the perfect point guard himself. D.D. McDyess is heading to Canada, and he will instantly become the face of the Woodsman franchise. So no McDyess for us, but with that, we're already on the clock. And we have the exact selection that I was expecting to have. Kuzma, Benjamin, Bibbs, and Mack all on the board. One player that I didn't really discuss much yet is Jermaine Rhodes, a 6'9" two-way wing from Missouri. Obviously, he is on the board as well, and there's a pretty decent case of selecting him here. I think he fits perfectly into the type of defense we want to play. He's a fantastic driver and finisher, but the shooting really concerns me. I think he just might be too poor of a shooter as a small forward / shooting guard for me to feel comfortable pairing him with Andre Lorbeck. There's also the issue that he plays the exact same position as Brandon Ingram, who himself is a 6'9" forward who can slide down to the shooting guard. I think Rhodes is going to be a really good player in this league, but much like Simon Benjamin, I feel like his fit is a little bit awkward with us. Luis Kuzma, though, I feel like fits in much more nicely, especially since we just traded away our starting power forward, Jaden McDaniels. Kuzma would replace him and have much better scoring potential right off the bat. We need a small ball power forward right now, as we don't really have that. We have 3s that can slide down to the 2, and we have 5s that can slide down to the 4, but Kuzma really slots into our starting lineup perfectly. Obviously, you get the same shooting concerns as you do with Rhodes, but Kuzma does have a much bigger frame than Rhodes, over 20 pounds heavier at the exact same height, which would allow him to score inside more efficiently. This was a really tough decision to make, but ultimately I'm going to trust the board and go with the consensus number 2 selection. So, with our first pick of the Year 3 offseason, we select Luis Kuzma from UCLA. I didn't think we were going to have a chance to draft high, but we sure did, and I'm excited to have Kuzma on the squad. And after the first 2 picks of the draft go pretty much as expected, the Wizards pull a wild pick out of their hat, taking Ezi Musli from Turkey. And with the 4th pick, the OKC Thunder go with Jared Edwards, guard from Ohio State. And to round out the top 5, the Rockets make a pretty safe pick, going with 6'8" forward Marquise Hightower from USC. The Raptors have a couple first-round picks thanks to the trade of DeMar DeRozan, and they use their recently acquired number 6 pick to select guard Jaden Bibbs from Kansas. And with another recently traded 4 pick, the Kings go with Matias Gorbenko at number 7. Jermaine Rhodes, who I thought was going to go much higher than this, finally gets taken off the board. The Owls select him at pick number 8. Utah goes with point guard Ira Mack at 9, and Simon Benjamin falls to number 10 as he joins Jaden Bibbs in Toronto. The Lakers are going to go with defensive point guard Dele Bagley out of Gonzaga. He will certainly benefit from the mentorship of Drew Holiday. And Boston goes with Oral Roberts center Rayshon Snyder at number 12. As we move toward the back of the lottery, it's going to be Tajir Godby going to Denver. And USC guard Dion Ivey is going to stay in California, going to the Kings. I was wondering who the Spurs were going to take with the pick we traded them, and they end up going with Georgia shooting guard Brad Jennings. Not a guy that I had very high on my board. I was monitoring him. He's a lanky 3-and-D prospect who might need some time to develop. And to close out the lottery, the Pelicans are going to go with Zellion Page, point guard from Florida State. Trey Orton, the defensive-minded center from Utah, is going to be headed to New York. And then the Suns go with Creighton forward Reese Freeman. The Timberwolves make an international pick at number 19, going with Lovro Tavkar. And Tar Heel center Sol J. Crabb goes to the Wizards at number 20. It's taken a while for the Kentucky guys to get drafted, but Derek Hardaway is going to be the first one selected by the Thunder at number 21. And with the Kings' 3rd first-round pick, they go big, selecting Juan Pablo Garcia from Villanova. The Warriors go with the Nigerian forward Joko Soluwade, and Cleveland goes with Logan Warwick out of Florida. 8 more picks in the first round, and the Sixers go with Stephon Franklin out of Duke, and Dorian Knight, one of the biggest wild card personalities in recent memory, is going to go to the Charlotte Hornets. Honestly, I'm not sure that's the environment he's going to thrive in. But then again, the Hornets are good in this series, so maybe they figured something out. A 3rd USC player gets selected in the first round. George Hoffman is going to the Detroit Pistons. And how cool is this? Memphis Tigers center Elijah McCoy is going to stay in Memphis with the Grizzlies. At number 30, the Atlanta Hawks select Dash Ballar from India. I said earlier in this video that Dash Ballar has a similar game to Trae Young. Now those two are going to get to play together, and Trae Young, now a championship-winning point guard, is going to be a pretty good mentor for Dash. Portland goes with Ukrainian big man Ivan Shved. The Bucks select Maryland forward Jawan Zusman, and the final pick of the first round is North Carolina guard Artavis Carney, going to the San Antonio Spurs. We have made another trade, sending Max Strus to the Charlotte Hornets in return for the 35th pick, or the 3rd pick of the 2nd round. For some reason I wasn't recording when I did this, but we originally had like the last pick of the 2nd round, which I was not interested in using. And I also didn't mind the idea of salary dumping Max Strus. He is being paid double-digit $1 million per year. So I made the move to trade up to the top of the 2nd round. And here are our top selections. Riley Singler is the highest ranked player on the board according to Draft Express. There are also a few players who made memorable Cinderella runs in March Madness, like Keenan Vonleh, who led FGCU to the Final Four. Alan Kinsey led Tulsa to the Sweet 16. And a little bit down there, you also see Terrion Dedmon, who led UCSD to the Final Four. But it certainly seems like Singler is the pick here, has A- potential, and what looks to be a really balanced offensive game with the shooting ability that our team needs. Our scouts only have him as a 71 overall, which makes him one of the best 2nd rounders available, but not so good that he's going to demand playing time right off the bat. Singler's a former top 15 recruit who didn't really live up to the hype, started off the season really badly but improved as the season went on, and ended up playing a pretty big role in the Elite 8 run. He needs to work on his discipline and his consistency, but the shooting talent is certainly there, and in the NBA he's going to have more time to sit on the bench and learn the game. And that's who we're going to go with at number 35. Riley Singler is headed to Chicago. That is the last move we made for the rest of the draft. Time now to simulate to the end and see some ratings. Here are the top 7 picks, and Luis Kuzma ends up being the second highest behind D.D. McDyess. McDyess well ahead of the pack at 82, Kuzma behind him at 78, no one was even a 77. And Luis Kuzma has an A potential. That's even higher than our scouts originally said. And that's the same potential as D.D. McDyess. Simon Beneman turned out to have a significantly lower overall than Kuzma's, but he has an A- potential. He's definitely got the chance to be a star. And Jaden Bibbs, 75 overall, B+ potential. Looks like a solid prospect, but I think we made the right pick. And Riley Singler ends up being worse than we scouted him as. He's only a 69 overall. And he doesn't have the A- potential, but it's not much worse. B+ is not bad for a second-round prospect. Both of our rookies are officially under contract. Kuzma is going to sign for $11 million per year, and with that, we can move on to free agency. Every player with a pending team option we are going to pick up. Asar Thompson, Donovan Clingan, these are no-brainers. The only one that I thought about was London Johnson, who really did not have a good season, but he's a young point guard with solid ratings. Not a bad option to have at the end of our bench. I'm going to keep him. And there is going to be a lot of big-name players looking for big paydays in this year's free agency. Trae Young, Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, Kawhi Leonard all declined their player options. Pretty sure all of them are also eligible for Supermaxes. We'll see if any of them actually switch teams. But one of the reasons I traded away Max Strus was because I wanted to open up some cap space to go big in free agency. I think we have a young core right now that's ready to take the next step. We got Brandon Ingram last season. That wasn't enough, but I still believe in this core. I really think they might be one star player away from being a perennial playoff team. We also have a few players eligible for the qualifying offer. We're going to be giving it to Dalen Terry. I think if possible, I'd like to keep him on the roster. He's only 24 years old with some pretty good ratings. I still think he has room to grow. Mark Mitchell's going to get it too, and I couldn't resist giving it to Justin Powell after the moments he had last season. So all three of those guys are now going to become restricted free agents. And here we are in day 1 of the moratorium, and this is a really stacked free agent class. Kevin Durant is a free agent, 37 years old, and I think he still might be the highest rated player in the league. There's also Trae Young coming off of a championship, Luka, Embiid, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler is a free agent too, as well as 28-year-old De'Aaron Fox, Mikal Bridges, and Bam Adebayo. So if the Hawks want to keep their championship core together, they're going to have to pay the big bucks. Paolo Banchero, who's up to an 85 overall, is also a free agent. And if you look a little bit down, even Steph Curry, who's still injured with the Achilles, is a free agent at 86 overall. Again, a quick reminder, if some of these ratings look a little bit odd to you, that's because I used a custom roster, and that roster really lowered the ratings curve across the game in order to make the players more balanced and realistic. It also decreases the badge counts for basically every player, as 2K likes to assign badges, like Oprah gives out cars. And badges actually have a really strong impact on a player's overall, so not having those is going to tank your rating. So yeah, Steph Curry's only an 86 overall at 38 years old, which is really weird to see, but he is still one of the most effective scorers in this game. Other notable names here are Julius Randle, Jaden Ivey, Rudy Gobert, OG Anunoby is a free agent, as is Jalen Williams, Anthony Simons too, Jalen Duren, Keegan Murray. So a lot of options here. But as a Blazer fan, it really caught my eye that 23-year-old Shaedon Sharpe is a free agent as well, a restricted free agent, asking for about $33.5 million a year. It's always a toss-up if teams are going to match the offer you give them, but we have had some success in restricted free agency before, Cole Anthony was a restricted free agent, and so was Jaden McDaniels, and we got them both. So this is just a preference of mine, but I really prefer to have most of the player movement in my 2K franchises to happen through trades rather than free agency, because I feel like in free agency, players just go to random teams that don't really make sense. They just go to the ones that have the most cap space. I really didn't want to see all the best players switch teams in free agency. Like, I didn't want to see Trae Young go to a different team right after winning a championship with the Hawks as the best player on that team. So basically what I like to do is to full 30 team control, or 32 in this case, and for all the top players in free agency, I will go user control their current team, and then I will give them a max offer or a super max offer. Because I find that oftentimes the computer doesn't even give those top players an offer, which makes no sense to me. Basically, I make sure that offer is made by the current team because the current team has the ability to offer more money than any other team. So oftentimes, that player ends up staying with their current team. But after I do that, I do give myself the ability to compete with that offer. If a player for some reason just doesn't want to return and would rather go to a new team for less money, then I let that happen. So that's basically what I did with Kevin Durant, Trae Young, Luka Doncic. I made sure their former teams made an offer to re-sign, and then as the Bulls, I offered them my own contract. I want the Bulls to be aggressive in free agency. We have over $40 million in cap space, and I plan on using as much of that as I can. I don't know how likely it is that they'll take less money to sign with me, but if there's a chance, I'll take it. And sure enough, Luka Doncic re-signs with the Mavs for the Supermax. Unfortunately, we won't get to see Luka and Lorbeck on the same team. Maybe later down the line it'll happen, but as of now, Luka stays with the Mavs. And I didn't capture it, but KD is staying with the Suns, Trae Young is staying with the Hawks. Everything's happening how I wanted it to happen. Now moving ahead to day 3 of the moratorium. Now that the top candidates are off the board, I zeroed in on some young players that I thought are really talented already and also have a lot of room to grow and fit into our rebuild perfectly as players who can stay with us for a long time. And Shaedon Sharpe is at the top of that list for me. The Blazers had a really successful year last year, finishing second in the West, and Shaedon Sharpe played a big role for them, scoring 20 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, almost 50% from the floor, over 36% from 3. This was a career best season for him in many ways. I've been on the lookout for a scoring-oriented guard that we can pair with Andre Lorbeck and Asar Thompson. We need more shooting, we need more shot creation. Shaedon Sharpe has that, and I think he's only going to get better at only 81 overall right now, already scoring 20 points per game. Imagine how well he's going to be doing when he's 85 overall or higher. But the elephant in the room is, of course, that there's a very good chance that the Blazers will match our offer and we'll have to find another option. But our team has a lot of cap space right now, and I think we have the ability to make an offer that's going to make the Blazers have a hard decision to make. We're giving him a $35.16 million salary in year 1, and it's going to be backloaded so that he's paid $40 million in year 4 with a 3+1 player option deal. And that's the most money we can possibly offer him. That $35 million a year in year 1 is the max offer. If we want a chance at landing a top restricted free agent like this, we're not going to be able to penny pinch. Shaedon is not the only restricted free agent that I'm interested in targeting, by the way. Paolo Banchero, the former #1 pick in 2022, is on the market, and it looks like the Mavericks are the team that's most aggressive in pursuing him, as they offered him a max deal. I decided to enter the Paolo sweepstakes as well. I think if Luis Kuzma needs some time to get acclimated to the NBA, Paolo would be a good player to sit behind because they are very similar players. And if we're trying to win now, obviously Paolo is the guy that we would want to have in our starting lineup. So we're going to offer him as much money as we can. That's the exact same contract that we gave to Shaedon Sharpe. Obviously we're competing with the Mavericks, who offered him a big contract, but he is a restricted free agent as well, so the Magic would probably be smart to match any offers and keep him on their roster. We can only offer 3 contracts every day of free agency, And the third guy that I'm preparing an offer to is Keegan Murray. We're going all 3 offers to restricted free agents this time around, as I think that's where the best value is at, and that's where the youngest players are. Murray is a knockdown shooter, the best shooter of the 3 players we're targeting, and he's not a complete liability on defense. He was more of a role player on the Kings instead of the main star. He's probably had the least impressive stats of the 3, which is probably the main reason why he's asking for the least money of the 3 players. So he'd probably be the least exciting acquisition, but I think he'd be a great backup plan if we aren't able to get Shaedon or Paolo. We are going to offer him about $70 million over 3 years. Okay, we've made our 3 offers. Let's see if anyone accepts. Okay, Shaedon Sharpe and Keegan Murray both agree to sign. We can only sign one of them though, as signing both would take us over the salary cap. Now there's still no telling if either contract is going to get matched, but if I had to choose between these 2 guys, I think I would definitely choose Shaedon. He's a lot more expensive, but I think that's fair because I believe he has way more star potential than Keegan Murray. It appears Paolo Banchero probably accepted the Mavericks offer over ours, which is why he's not showing up here. So my plan here is to accept Sharpe, decline Murray, and then if Sharpe ends up getting matched, then we can go back and pursue Murray again in the next day of free agency. I'm also keeping the cap hold on Dalen Terry because I do plan on bringing him back if possible, but because I'm doing that, it's actually forcing me to renounce the rights to Mark Mitchell and Justin Powell to stay under the cap, so we likely won't be seeing those players back next year. Alright, we're this close to landing a 23-year-old shooting guard who just averaged 20 points per game, has A+ athleticism, and who I believe has all-star potential. If I were the Blazers, I don't know if I'd be willing to let go of Shaedon Sharpe. They did just pay Kawhi Leonard though, so they're going to have a really high payroll if they're going to keep everyone. Let's see what happens. The Orlando Magic have matched the offer for Paolo Banchero, so we don't get him and neither do the Mavericks. Now we hope and pray that the same thing doesn't pop up for Shaedon Sharpe. We got him! Shaedon Sharpe is officially a Chicago Bull. How do you like that, Bulls fans? Let me know how this team's looking in the comments. So now we have 2 3-level scoring wings in Brandon Ingram and Shaedon Sharpe. And behind them, we have a young core of playmakers and defenders. I don't think I see us being the worst team in the league another year. With the big signing done, we can now shift focus to Dalen Terry, who is still on the market as a restricted free agent. We have his bird rights, which means we can go over the cap to re-sign him. I'm offering him 2 years, about $23 million, and then an additional team option year. I like to use team options, especially on young players. It gives you so much more contract flexibility. But we have a couple more roster spots to fill, and since we're such a young team, I wanted to look for a veteran. Marcus Smart is an option here, but he is being heavily pursued by a lot of teams. And I am offering him more money per year than any other team that's offered him yet, but I am sneaking in a team option at the end. Smart does not immediately accept that offer, but Dalen Terry does. So we're going to sign him back for 2 years, $23 million, team option added on. And we're not able to get Marcus Smart. He ended up agreeing to a deal with the Toronto Raptors. We have 2 more spots to fill, and I wanted one more bench scorer, someone who can really light it up from 3. Malik Monk is an option, a really good shooter. Maybe not the best on the market, but he can do a lot more than just shoot. He can handle the ball really well, can play backup point guard if needed, and he's not just a spot-up shooter, he can shoot off the dribble. We are able to offer the mid-level exception still, so we're going to give that to Monk, and you know I like my team options, I'm slapping one on there. The best shooter on the market is probably Luke Kennard, and not only does he have a really good rating, but he also has these gold badges, which have a big impact on the court, and it also allows him to mentor some young players. And since Kennard is older than Monk and is kind of a one-dimensional role player, we're going to be able to get him for much cheaper. He has pretty solid interest in a minimum deal. And the third guy I'm going after is 79 overall Aaron Gordon. Right now our power forward depth chart consists of Luis Kuzma and Branko Todorovic. That's it. That's not necessarily a bad rotation, but I think those young guys could benefit from a veteran at their own position. Gordon won a championship with the Nuggets, and he has a couple gold badges of his own, which makes him a good mentor. He's definitely regressed since that championship year with the Nuggets, but he's still very much a starting caliber player. I think he would be our starting power forward unless Kuzma looks like a superstar right away. So AG is going to get the same mid-level exception offer that we gave to Malik Monk. But since he's an older, more accomplished player, I decided to give him a player option instead of a team option. And both of those players end up accepting. We're going to go with Aaron Gordon between these two guys. He is the better player, 3 overall higher. And we offered Luke Kennard that minimum deal. He's still mulling. I'm looking for just one more guard and one more forward. And I think the best route would be to go with Gordon and Kennard. And there it is. Luke Kennard accepts the minimum deal. And that gives us 15 players. Let's quickly go over some of the interesting free agency signings around the league. The Blazers not only lose Shaedon Sharpe, but they also let go of DeAndre Ayton. He's going to go to the Jazz for $28 million a year. But even though Portland lost a lot, they gained a lot back. OG Anunoby is going to be headed to Portland on a pretty team-friendly deal. And they also go out and get Kristaps Porzingis, who is likely going to become their new starting center. And they also get Chris Middleton, who leaves the Spurs for another contending team in the West. So the Blazers have an interesting offseason. They keep Kawhi for one more year. They lose a lot of young talent. They get a lot older, but honestly, they might be just as good. And since the Jazz signed Ayton, they ended up letting go of Walker Kessler in restricted free agency. He goes to the Clippers. And following him there is Keegan Murray, one of the guys we were targeting. He ends up signing with the Clippers for about $18.5 million per year. Wendell Carter Jr., the former Bull and the longtime Magic center, is going to be going to the Pelicans. The Lakers get another scoring piece in Colin Sexton. And Michael Porter Jr. leaves Brooklyn to sign with the Grizzlies for super cheap. Wow, I can't believe the Pistons didn't keep Jalen Duren. He goes to the Raptors alongside Marcus Smart. And I didn't capture this, but the Pistons actually replaced Duren with Yusuf Nurkic. That is a questionable move. And the Nets did lose Michael Porter Jr., but they get Jalen Williams to replace him. And that is going to be it for free agency. Here is our new revamped roster for Season 4. These are the ratings of our players before progression happens, and here they are after. This is a little bit hard to read because I think it goes off of the rating that the player had before last season started. Brandon Ingram's overall actually went down by 1. It says it went up by 1. That is not true. His 3-point rating goes from a B- down to a C+. But we get the opposite jump from Shaedon Sharpe. He goes up to a B-. And we thought he was going to be an 81 overall. He's actually going to be an 82. Ausar Thompson unfortunately did not progress. His inside scoring got worse. Donovan Clingan goes up to a 79 overall. That's certainly encouraging. And we had some pretty solid progression from our young players. Jet Howard goes up to a 77. Same with Andre Lorbeck and Mace Gadzarich. And with Dalen Terry, it says he went up by 1. He did not. He stays at 76. Branko Todorovic goes up by 1. He's now a 73. Unfortunately, Icot Lucas did not change. This video is already long enough. I'm not going to play any Summer League games. We're just going to simulate through them and look at the stats. Our first one was an overtime win over the Magic. Luis Kuzma makes his debut in a Bulls uniform, and he goes for 12 points and 8 rebounds. And Riley Singler did not look very good at all. He was scoreless. Branko Todorovic, though, picking up where he left off last season. 23 points in 19 minutes. And we win our second game in a row. Luis Kuzma with an even better game this time, 17 points. Patrick Baldwin Jr. was just a random guy that I picked up off the free agent pool. He's been playing really well for us. And another disappointing showing from Singler in Game 2. He does score, but he goes 2 of 7 from the field, failing to hit a three-pointer. And I missed the chance to look at the third box score, but we do end up winning that game by 30, and Luis Kuzma has his best game yet, a 20-point double-double. We're now in the tournament stage, and Luis Kuzma just keeps getting better. 26 points on 10 of 13 shooting, and he even made a three-pointer. But in the second round of the playoffs, we lose to the Grizzlies. Luis Kuzma struggled from the field, but he did have 8 rebounds and 7 assists. Andre Lorbeck was fantastic, but he couldn't carry us to the win. The Summer League Championship featured the #1 pick D.D. McDyess. He led his team to the championship with some great performances, but not able to get it done against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Instead, it was Jared Edwards, the #4 pick, dropping 26 in the championship game and getting the win. And finally, we've made it all the way to Season 4. That was my attempt at squeezing in March Madness, the NBA playoffs, and an entire offseason all in one episode. I think I understand why I used to split it in 2, but I'm trying to just get more efficient with this series and move it along. I made this offseason video as fast as I can, and I hope it turned out okay. For those of you who were hoping that we would make the miraculous jump from worst team in the league to best, unfortunately it's not that easy. We are power ranked as the 19th best team to begin the season. And while I do think we got a lot better, we're probably not at the level of the Blazers or the Bucks or the Spurs quite yet. But even though we don't necessarily have the highest rated players, I think I've put together a roster that really meshes well together. And I think that might allow us to play above that number 19 power ranking. But we won't have to wait long until we can see this new team in action. I'm looking forward to getting the Season 4 premiere out on YouTube as fast as I can. We're going to be playing against the Jazz at home to begin the year. After that, we play the Wizards, and then the #1 and #2 picks square off in Chicago when we play D.D. McDyess and the Woodsmen. Let me know what you guys think of the moves I made in the offseason. I'm really happy with how it went. We got the #2 pick back. We took a guy that I think was the best pick in that spot in Luis Kuzma. And then we swung for the fences in free agency. We didn't necessarily get the top guys like Luka Doncic, but we did get Shaedon Sharpe, who I think is going to develop into an absolute beast for us. I hope you guys are still sticking around and enjoying this series. I know I certainly am, and I'm looking forward to continuing it. I would really appreciate if you guys liked, subscribed, turned on post notifications, left some feedback in the comments, and even recommended me to a friend. Any way you guys can help out would be really appreciated. Have a good rest of your day, everyone, and I will see you in the Season 4 premiere of the Chicago Bulls franchise.